I wish that they loved their sister. You know,
Yeah.
kinda. You guys are crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Biz Dad podcast. Today, I'm excited to introduce another good buddy of mine in GoBundance, another Adam. So he's got to be awesome because, I mean, with a name like that, you can't go wrong. But Adam Hill, he has got a great story. Looking forward to chatting with him about his family, about his businesses, about his podcast, about anything and everything that comes up. But to start, Adam, if you can introduce yourself a little bit, tell us about your family, tell us about your businesses, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Adam. This is awesome. And yeah, that's one of the thrills about being named Adam is you don't get your name mispronounced a lot. I guess that's a privilege or whatever. So I don't think I've ever had anybody, have a problem with it. But I'm Adam Hill. I live in Denver, Colorado currently, originally from Southern California. My family, I have my wife, Marie. I've been married to her for about 19 years with two wonderful kids. My daughter, Sarah, who's 15, my son, Zachary, who's 12. So the business wise, my family, my great grandfather started a business in Southern California called Hill Brothers Chemical Company. He moved over from Canada with his father. Started this company in Los Angeles in 1923 when Los Angeles was nothing but a few buildings and a bunch of orange fields out there. And he delivered essentially laundry products by bicycle to local area businesses and laundromats and things like that. And over the time it evolved, his sons joined the workforce. His 4 sons joined the workforce, and they expanded it. And then into the western states, so Arizona, Utah, and the rest of California. And then the third generation took over, which was my dad's generation, and they continued to build on it. And I recently took over as president about 6 years ago. So we're in the 4th generation of the business. We just celebrated our 100th birthday a few weeks ago.
That's
and
awesome. Congrats.
we look great for our age, but we're still kicking strong in all the western states. Today we sell industrial, environmental chemicals for water treatment, sewage treatment, all of the gross stuff you don't want to think about, but help us stay clean and all of that good stuff. So,
nice.
That's a nutshell. Otherwise, I also build a personal brand where I have a podcast, I speak, and I help people to essentially reframe fear and build a better relationship with it. To summarize, and we can get into that a bit more if you'd like to. Let's do it.
Oh, I'm positive we will. Yes, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and digging into it. But before we do that, though, you obviously told us a little bit about your dad in the fact that he, was one of the patriarchs of the company you're now running. So if you can walk me through a little bit of what it was like growing up with him. I'm assuming that I don't think there takes much assumption, but that you kind of ended up where you are right now because of the family business and where everything's going. So tell me what it was like growing up with your dad, and what kind of things maybe you take from your father and use today.
Yeah, so I consider myself very fortunate to have the parental dynamics that my parents had in my life. Growing up, and I think we're around probably the same age. We grew up amongst a lot of friends that were, with divorced parents, with challenging households and things like that. My parents loved each other very much. My dad was, the epitome of showing love to my mom. So right away, and within, one of the first impacts that I've had for my dad is how to love another person and live with that person as a life partner, and he loved my mom. He still loves my mom very much, and they still practice that, and it's something that has been very aspirational to me as I look at my relationship with my own wife, and as far as from the perspective of the business side of it, having this family business, it was always growing up knowing that this thing was a family business, knowing that my dad was currently, at least for most of my childhood, in a leadership role, not quite running it, but working for his parents. So this idea of a family business was always a central theme, and was always kind of aligned with how that relationship I had with my dad. It was always associated with his business and this family aspect that was around it. So yeah, I mean, aside from that, it was just a very privileged childhood of how we were able to grow up with a loving father. There was nothing really bad there. In fact, I mean, I think the only real challenge is that I think that, being in a business that is, a family business, it's easy, of course, to be pulled away into that business. And so obviously my relationship growing up was more like, with my mom being there and my dad was working. But I had this amazing experience with my dad when I was probably 17 or 18. During that time, it was like traditional rebellious teenager kind of thing where my parents were not cool at that time, of course. And, I'm trying to spend more time with my friends, but there was this incredible high school trip that where a marine biology class growing up in Southern California next to the ocean, there was a marine ecology class where we learned about, the all the ocean stuff and all that kind of stuff. And they were going to take a trip down to not Cabo San Lucas, but the Baja Peninsula on the Sea of Cortez, like just in the middle of nowhere. No like civilization around for like 40 miles. We had to drive on dirt roads to get there. We would camp out for 10 days. And so this was like a class of 30, 40 high school kids doing this. And
that sounds dreadful to have to be monitoring that. But anyways, go ahead.
It was, yeah. So, yeah. So this is, dad was a hero to jump into that. But, it was, in that instance, it was like, he jumped in and said, yeah, I want to go there and do that. And to a teenager at that time, it would be like, sometimes thinking of it, it'd be like, oh, mortifying to think, oh, my parents are coming with me on a trip for 10 days, Cabo San Lucas or in Baja. And, but I was actually like really kind of thrilled about it because it meant like, getting to spend more time. And that was one of the defining triggering, experiences I had, because it was just, there's something about like taking yourself out of civilization for a while, bringing yourself into a new tribe where you're all kind of together in that instance and living together in that way. And him really showing me for the first time what he was like as a leader, as a person that was really caring and really digging in and getting to know him deeper on a spiritual level was amazing. So I really treasure that experience. I think that was a defining moment for us on where our journey would go from there. And there was after that, there was a lot of turmoil and a lot of, challenge and then of course, growth and coming back together kind of stuff. But that was one of the defining moments growing up for me with him.
Well, that's awesome. I envy, envy's the wrong word. Because I look back at my relationship with my dad, and I had a great relationship with him. Just, it was a relationship when he was able to be home, type of thing, Yeah. And it sounded like there was a piece of that in there, and I'd like to kind of ask you about it, because you'd mentioned like growing up mostly with your mom, because your dad was helping run the company and doing all the stuff. So did you find that? So I'm trying to fill some gaps in my brain, right? So great father, very happy, privileged upbringing, mixed with a little bit of, but I didn't really get to see him a whole lot until I was in high school doing this high school trip where I finally got to connect with him on a different level. So like, what kind of connections did you guys have in between that time that maybe you were lacking, or maybe that now looking back on it, you go, I see why that happened, or walk me through any of that.
Yeah. And a lot of this, comes down to my personality growing up too. Like I grew up with a lot of worry, with a lot of social kind of anxieties that we didn't talk about back then. We just said like, oh, he's a spaz. He's kind of like, doesn't, and so I was kind of that way. And in that way, because like, my dad was at work and I didn't, interact with him like in the day to day, there was this feeling of like, he's larger than life, or he's bigger than, And so so there was that disconnect of like that I guess that element of fear, where it wasn't like, I was afraid that he was going to hit me or something like that, but I was like afraid of, I guess, a lot of the other stuff, like of disappointing him or being confronting with him, or just the dread of having that. So that was where a lot of that disconnect came from, and I think just like the dynamics of how parents were in that day. It was like there wasn't a lot of like, well, I'm gonna lean into that and ask like, how are you feeling? What's how can we connect better? It was just kind of like more of a father, kind of like, this is how a father needs to be, which is, I'm going to correct you when you're wrong, I'm going to discipline you, and I'm going to praise you when you do something well. But going deeper than that is was not really something that I was doing at an earlier age. And like I say, that's, I think, why that Baja trip was so defining, because that was that first opportunity to really do that, which was great.
So I get the feeling, and knowing you a little bit, that that's not quite how you like. Do you go, I'm guessing, a little deeper with your kids based off of that feeling that you had, and like with that defining moment, how has that changed the way you wanted to be present as a father? What, how did that change your feelings there?
Yeah, it's I know it's always in my mind, like when I'm interacting with my kids, like that I see myself in them, and I know that seems like a weird, selfish thing to do, but I see that, like, are they feeling the same way I did in that way? Or maybe it's empathy, maybe it's maybe it's ego, whatever. But I try to look at it as it is empathy, and so I do try to dig in a little bit more. And the way I connect more with them, and maybe this is more of like a surface level thing, but it's through humor. I live into that quintessential dad joke kind of persona with them, and that, I think that adds a level of, or at least I hope it does. I hope that it adds a level of humanity to our experience together. That I'm not perfect. I'm awkward. I'm not. I don't want you to think of me as something that's not approachable, but I also want you to recognize that I'm here to guide and support and be that, and give space where you need it. So that's kind of where I look at that.
Okay. You're a few years ahead of me on this, so I'm going to ask selfishly, like, how do you find that balance between like being that fun, jovial dad that I could tell you are, and I strive to be myself, with still creating those boundaries that say, hey, I'm still dad, I'm still the leader of the house, I'm still, like, where do you draw some of those lines, and what kind of conversations do you have with your kids that help make sure that those are defining terms there?
Yeah, I haven't always. I mean, I haven't done that well. Early in the growing up stage, it would be a lot more. Yeah,
you weren't a perfect father the second you became a father. Wait a minute.
Call the police. I know, right? No, yeah, it's. But yeah, it. I mean, I found that like I was doing a lot of the, when there was misbehavior, or more when there was like or better even said, maybe not even misbehavior, but like I'm at home, I want quiet, or I want relaxation, and there's just loud and playing, and I would be like, let's stop the noise, or just like that, just cut it out because it's annoying me. Instead of looking at it like more holistically, like I'm living with these other human beings that are growing, that are developing, that are playing, that are learning that this kind of stuff is real, that maybe I should just put my own self-interest aside to actually like, allow that to happen. So, especially in the younger days of my son, I know I was not as great with that. And I think over the last few years, I've been better at quieting that voice of just like, and being more like, I'm going to try to get onto my son's level of like, this is the way that he likes to play. He's not a ball sports kind of kid. Neither was I, but it's not, I can't force the like, hey, let's go play catch, or let's play, this. It's like, I have to come to his level. I have to play some video games with him, or I have to, use the fun and interesting humor that he has and kind of play in that way. And also show like, when there are serious things that are happening, I'm like, let's, very calmly to say like, let's, you need to try to do that in a different way, or you need to, be nice to your sister. You need to, stop treating people like this, or how can we do that better? Less of like the, just stop that behavior, and more of like, well, how can we improve, or how can we address what's really, really going on?
I think it's critical for kids to get that and understand so I'm a huge fan of the word why, which did not work out so well for me as a military guy, but does work out well for me like as a business owner and dad, because like my dad always told me, it's like, that's how little boys learn, is by asking why. And I always asked why and wanted to hold on to that. So then when I'm raising my boys, I said the same thing. I said, this is how little boys learn. Like my sister-in-law Yesenia, it drives her insane, because Adam is always asking why. Adam, my oldest, is always like, well, why is this that way, or why do we do that this way? And she's like, we just do. I don't know. Like, well, we just do is not a good answer. We need a better, like, so to dig in, if you're just saying, which I have been, and still to this day am guilty of sometimes, just like, no, just stop doing that. Like, okay, well, there's got to be a reason. So what I've tried to do is tell my kids, like, okay, well, if I tell you just to stop doing it, then you stop. Work to the right time of saying, okay, Daddy, can you help me understand why? Because if I'm being short, that's my fault. That's not your fault. It's my fault I'm short. Right. Even if you just smashed me in the head with a car, it's my fault that I'm short and reactionary, not your fault. You shouldn't have hit me with a car. But I need to remember, like, hey, he's still 8. He's still my other one's still 4. Like that, I've got to remember that and dig deep into myself to go, okay, well, it's not the dad show here. Like this, to your point, like I like the way you said that. Like I've got to live life with all of these humans in this house and make sure that I'm representing that well. And man, sometimes it's tough. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially with when they get to the teenage years, and it's like, I mean, I know being in the military, I'm sure you lived in barracks, but at that, and I don't know how different that was from like living in a dorm, or if you've lived with roommates or things like that, but roommates when you're a teenager, it's just like a mess. And that's what it's kind of like now. It's like living with roommates that are a mess, and we have to have all of these house rules, and it's just like being back in college in an apartment. It's like, wow, so but yeah, it's,
you put it that way, it sounds even more dreadful. I'm not sure I would.
Well, I'm not gonna go as far as to say that you're in the best years of the kid's life, but you're kind of in the best years of the kids.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I have loved every moment. Like, my wife is kind of once in a while like, man, I just don't like watching him grow up, and I'm like, I just love watching him grow up. Like she, and we just had another kid, so that just turned 3 months old. So Diana's still very small. It gets that feeling back again, holding a little baby, but I just love watching every stage and seeing how the changes go and what goes on with it. And it just is so much fun for me to get, but I've wanted to be a dad since I was like 13. So it's like I'm finally like living this exciting world of being a dad, and realizing how terrible I am at it from time to time, like I'll do something and I'm like, so that's why that's one of the impetuses for this podcast is to gather good ideas from folks, and like, hey, none of us are perfect dads. Like if I could figure out how you're better at certain things than I am, and where I may be excelling that you're not, and grow from it. Well,
that's why I think this is like the best idea for for a show, by the way, because like every dad feels this way. Even coming onto the show, I'm like, man, I hope I can learn a lot from Adam today, because I need some help. It's just like we all grow through a community, and I mean, this is the best source of doing that. It's just like learning, because I think it applies so well to the idea of fatherhood that like, I too wanted to be a father since I was really young, but like, and then you had all these visions of what it's going to look like. I'm going to go fishing with my kids. I'm going to do this. I'm going to play catch. I'm going to play ball and all this kind of stuff. And then it's like Mike Tyson says, y'all have a plan until you get punched in the face. Right.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we said in the military, right? A plane goes to crap after first fire. Like the second something happens, it's all over. But planning is plans are useless. Planning is priceless. So it is another thing that we used to say. And like the planning portion of all of this, and like I want to be diligent in the planning of my kids' future and the planning of how all of this works. That doesn't mean my plans are going to go the way I'm getting ready to start homeschooling. First time, never done this. I'm the one doing it. Like my wife is still active duty. I'm running a couple businesses. I'm thinking to myself, how stupid are you for doing this? Right. So I've got plans on how I want it to all go, but the plans are probably going to go to crap. But the planning portion of it, to where I'm like, okay, well, how do I work through this? How many dads have I talked to about what they do with all of this? And I think that we need to grow around each other, and not to go too off of any deep end, but if we look at like representatives of dads on TV shows and all the stuff, they're always like the worthless waste of space. Like, I mean, they're stupid. The moms are always running everything. And I mean, don't get me wrong, my wife does an amazing job helping run this house. But it doesn't mean that every dad is an idiot. Like, so if society always wants to point at dads to be an idiot, like then we as dads need to get together and say, okay, how do we prove them wrong that we're not idiots, and part of that's going to be growing together like this. So
yeah. I should introduce you to a friend of mine named Eric Beach, who is an amazing guy, also a veteran, and he homeschools his kids. He does it as well, and nice. And so he kind of lives out of that, and we've talked a lot about that idea of kind of breaking that stigma of dads being like always the outside of the house, like kind of like my dad was, like out, and while mom's raising, because that whole persona I see it changing so much around, like, just in yourself and in Eric, and a lot of dads are getting so involved. A lot of the guys in GoBundance doing, the homeschooling thing and taking a heavy, if not the lead role in that. So I think it's an important big step, and I think it's a good one.
So, well, thank you. I look at fathers. I'm a Christian. I kind of have that worldview, that thought process, that I should be the leader of my house. That doesn't mean that my wife is not a leader in the house as well, but the buck has to stop somewhere, right? And if something goes wrong in the house, then it's my responsibility. If something goes right in the house, then hopefully I did okay. But it's hard for me to say, and I looked at schooling, and I'm like, even though my kids go to a private Christian school, I thought to myself, all right, well, I am still pawning off 8 hours a day to somebody else's whim when I don't know who they are at home. I don't know what it is. And then they come home and I get maybe 2 hours with them an hour of that is homework, and then an hour of that is eating, and then maybe I get to play with them for a little bit. Like, how much of a connection am I having with my kids? How well am I leading my kids in what I think their life should entail? And I don't know. I may be completely oblivious to what I'm about to walk into, but at the same point, if it's that much of a conviction on me to be, to lead my family that way, then I'm excited to give it a whirl and see how it goes. But
it's definitely worth a try. We homeschooled our kids for a while. They're back in traditional school now, and there's a reason why we did that. But my wife, because I was with the company doing all this stuff, took the primary lead role in teaching them, and it was a very valuable experience. I mean, and there's so many. I think there's a lot of benefits that I've seen from it. A is that you can condense a lot of the time of that 8 hours into like 2 hours. I mean, the primary core stuff is you can get through that really quick. And then the rest of the time is that connection time that you're talking about, which is hugely valuable. And you could bring them into different cohorts of kids where they're spending time not just with one age group, but with multiple ages, more diverse array of kids and people, so they learn how to interact with a variety of ages. I think it does help with the social aspect, the confidence aspect, and I see a lot of benefits to it.
Yeah. Well, I sure hope that's the way it works out. In my head, that's the plan. That's how it works out. But we'll see how it goes.
Right.
It was funny because the other day, my son, I was driving with him, and he's like, I think I do want to do the homeschooling because I've been chatting with him about it. I want, kind of his buy-in. Ultimately, my wife and I need to make the decision, but I'd love to hear his thoughts on it. And he was kind of wishy-washy at first, right? So he was starting school when COVID kicked in, right? So we ended up he got taken out of school, and then he was watching school on the computer, right? So he would sit there watching his kindergarten classes on computer. And I was like, boy, this has got to be dreadful for him, but we hitting all the marks. And then when I told him we were talking about homeschool, eventually he finally asked me, he said, well, who's going to be my teacher? I said, well, I'll be your teacher. Oh, I thought I was going to have to watch it on the computer again. I could do that if you're going to be my teacher. And I was like, no, buddy, you're not going to be stuck in because he just remembers kindergarten. Like, oh man, this was dreadful. I will say though, his teacher was awesome. Then, she came out to the house with like congratulations balloons and everything for graduating kindergarten amazing. And all the stuff because we didn't actually get to do all the stuff. But anyway, so I want to ask you. You mentioned that your kids are back in school and there are reasons for that. So I gather multiple reasons from other folks, but I'd love to hear kind of why you put your kids back into traditional school and dig into that a little bit.
Yeah. So the reason we did that is so, like I said, we did homeschool our kids for a while. My daughter once she started like first grade, and then my son all since kindergarten, and when we started to enter into 2019. My daughter started having some pretty significant health issues with it flipped like a switch. It was one of those things where where 1 month in December, over Christmas time, we were doing daddy-daughter dates, where we're going out for burgers and ice cream and all this kind of stuff. And by January, she was, restricting eating, not eating anything, and having a lot of fears around food. And it turned into a pretty severe eating disorder. And that became, kind of our primary, that shifted our focus, like from, just the traditional parenting. That was the Mike Tyson punch in the face that we got, where it was like, now we've got to come back and we've got to help a child recover and work through this. And also work with another child who's, seeing a lot of this and a lot of the behavioral issues and that, that's still going on to this day. It's so it's still an issue we deal with, though she's in recovery. But that led into, that happened within a few months of COVID happening. And then we dropped into COVID where we couldn't bring her into facilities. We couldn't, and there was a lot of, so there was a lot of like, well, you're on your own kind of stuff. And so that whole thing of us being on our own for as long as we were and trying to learn and figure out via trial and error how to manage this and best parent through this, led us down to the point of, a bit of exhaustion, if we're honest, of like, by the time school opened up, we got with our kids and we said, well, this has been a pretty heavy deal for all of us. How do you guys feel about going to school and doing it, with a class and with, more of your peers, since you haven't been in that for so long? And they were like, yeah, we want to do that. So, so they went into the traditional school. And I think it was that, for us, at least at that time, was a big relief for, my wife to have that. And with my daughter being in and out of treatment, that has helped, my son to be able to still get the learning and the attention that he needs while doing it. So very personal reasons. And it's not because we're not huge advocates and love the idea of homeschooling, because we do, but it was more out of, kind of a necessity and a feeling like that was probably the best option for us at the time.
Wow, that's I'm glad that she's in recovery. That's for sure. I'm sure that you as the dad, I'm sure, make very happy that that's happening. But what, if you don't mind me asking, how, like, if you dug into that, like, what was the cause, do you think, that started that the eating disorder problem?
It's really hard to say, and we still don't know what the root cause is. And I think that's going to take a long, a lot of therapy and working through on Sarah's end. And I think we can, like, I can maybe speculate. Like there's social media aspects where, like, that the idea of eating restriction and things like that are very prevalent. And sadly, we're seeing a lot more of this in young people and young girls in particular. But it could be just the idea that there was just something like some fear that latched on to some trauma, and then it just started snowballing. It's really hard to say, but it is one of those things where it's just gonna. We've done a lot of time trying to get to the root to that issue and just try to solve and get her back on track. Now the unraveling, or kind of the therapy and all of that stuff is beginning, and we work through it that way. So it's kind of a lifelong process.
I would imagine. Yeah. I mean, that's I look at some of the my mind goes to things that, like, high school would cause a lot of that, because I mean, back when we were in high school, that was one of those things that anorexia or some things like that were what a lot of girls did to try to match what was going on, what they saw, the images in whatever magazines or whatever. But social media, I could not imagine the world of hurt, especially on young girls, that is doing right now, and the things are going on. But so do you feel like that was like the transition into public school, the transition into traditional school, I don't know what public or private, but has been helping in that process as well? Or do you think there's some other things? Well, I'm sure there's other things involved too, but has that been helpful in the process?
I think so, because there's the idea that structure helps in that kind of chaos. So having that level of structure really helps, especially for, I'd say, my son right now. Even though he hated the idea at first, he really didn't like going back to school, and like a lot of that. And I get it. And one of the things I'm really proud of him for is kind of embracing that fear and realizing, that this is an opportunity. This is, yes, a scary thing, but this is not scary like I should avoid it. This is scary, I should lean into it and grow from it. And he really has. He's embraced it. He's doing really, really well in school. He's in middle school now, so he's just going into 7th grade. And yeah, he's starting to get like friends, and I've just seen him blossom and really grow from that. And my daughter's kind of been in and out of school with some of these challenges. So, but she's been able to keep up kind of on the outside a little bit. So she's going back within the next few weeks, and that should be exciting to see what happens.
So do you've dealt with some addiction issues and some various things as well. Like,
yes.
Did you use any of your, how long ago was that? And do you see any correlation between yourself and your daughter in that sense, like in how that all went down?
So interesting. I do. She doesn't. But that's like,
of course not. Yes.
I can't.
But teenagers know everything already, so
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it is one of those things where, like, when you're in it, you feel very unique. You feel very alone, and you feel like nobody will understand. So I kind of understand where that mindset's coming from. But from my perspective, I do look at it and I see the addiction I went through and the insidious nature of it. And again, I think it helps me to really empathize and understand that as illogical as it seems, I mean, when I don't know, I mean, I don't want to make presumptions, but I think that when, most people look at food, it's like, okay, if I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. I need to eat something. I need, I'm going to eat. But, in her mind, it's just different, where it's just like, this is scary. I can't do this. And I want to, starving myself makes me feel better than actually eating. And that's such a tragic, thing to think about. But I can understand it at the conceptual level, because I've been through the addiction side of it, or the alcoholism side of it. And I've understood what it's like to not being able to control it, and not being able to stop. So without the help. So yeah,
man. Yeah, and what a not great portion of the conversation for the whole family to come in and join, right? So,
well, we can pivot. Yeah,
we're getting nice and deep, and I've got more questions. And then, you guys want to say hi to Mr. Adam? No, you want to fight over the blueberries? There's more blueberries in the fridge, boys.
Yeah.
You don't have to come and eat my blueberries. See, this is what it's like to have two boys. And here I am thinking about doing homeschooling and having them here all the time. And then, all of this is going to never end, right?
Right.
The benefit is I get to hear these laughs.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, no, it is like, yeah.
Yeah,
it's an opportunity. It's just an opportunity to spend more time, and I love that. Yeah, that's awesome.
What did you want to tell me, Rourke? You're going to tell everybody now, by the way. So be careful what you say.
Does he have the earphones? Tell everybody.
What's up, buddy? Oh. What do you want to tell me, dude? Do you think you guys can work that out? I think when we watch them, they'll get back to it. It almost sounds like it's nap time. Wow. All right.
Me too, buddy. Me too.
Yeah, we all want naps. All right. I'm going to keep talking to Mr. Adam. Okay, bud? I'm going to keep talking to Mr. Adam. All right, boys? I love you. You guys say bye.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, you guys will see yourself on a recording again in another couple months. Washington, D.C. is about a 14-hour drive. I mean, geography lessons. Here we go.
Right.
All right. So I do want to, I don't want to pivot quite yet, despite the distraction. I want to go back and ask a couple more things. So when you were working through the alcoholism side of the house, were you already I don't remember how long ago that was, so forgive me, but how long ago was that, and how long have you been in recovery and all of that?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that I've been in recovery for about 11 years now. So since January 22nd of 2012, that was my first step into recovery. And I've been obviously doing the math there. I was a dad while I was still drinking and still in the midst of my alcoholism. And so I started drinking when I was in college. And one of the biggest one of the biggest. I hope I'm okay talking about this right now. Is that all right? Or
yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I wouldn't have asked the question if I didn't know.
No, I just didn't. I just wanted to make sure. But started drinking when I first started college. That was my first sip of alcohol, and kind of like I said earlier, my anxiety. I had this social, this budding, this like anxiety, this worry that I was growing up with all my life, that like just I was always just afraid to do normal things. Like I wanted to play football, but when I got there, I'm like, now I'm afraid to get hit. Like I don't want to do this.
Yep.
I wanted to play baseball, but little things like, oh, you got to step into the pitch, step into it. This thing that's being thrown at me, I know I got to step out. And so it was just like my nature to be really afraid of small things. And when I got into college, it was always so social anxiety with it. But as many people do, I had drinks at parties. I started drinking, and at first, this is the insidious nature of the disease. I mean, there was no indication that I should be a problem drinker or an alcoholic because nobody in my family was. Yeah. I mean, so we didn't really talk about it. We didn't think about it. And my perception of alcoholism was, oh, that's like the guy behind the dumpster kind of thing. Or, the people that had like a traumatic childhood or something like that. But I didn't realize that it's more, pervasive than that. And so when I started drinking, no indication it would be a problem. It started getting really fun, and there was no consequences to it. Like I could drink, I could control my alcohol for a while, and I went to bed at a reasonable hour. And the amazing thing that I realized, and this was like the insidious part of it, was that it lifted all of my fears away. And if I didn't know that I had like any kind of anxiety disorder at that time, I realized it then, because I'm like, whoa, this is what life is supposed to be like. I'm talking to people, I'm able to communicate with girls, and I'm able to have fun and feel like I'm the life of the party. This feels like how I should be. it felt like how, and then like, it faded away, and then, it went back to normal. And then, it'd be like, I wouldn't think about it for a while, and then I'd do it again. And then over time, it was like, it became, fun with problems where like just little problems would creep in. Like, oh, I kind of don't remember what happened last night. What did we do? And it's like, oh, don't worry, you're fine. Just like, oh, okay, but I just don't remember that. That's weird. And then it would be like, or dude, you got a little out of hand last night. That was kind of crazy, wasn't it? But still no like significant consequences. But then by the time it just became problems, I was having severe panic attacks. Like I started getting severe panic attacks about my third year into college. And they were all around just things you would think are ridiculous or completely irrational. Like, the police are after me for something. I don't know what, but they're after me. Or I have this horrible, deadly disease, and it was crippling. And like, I would just like get into this massive panic where my chest would tighten and I would just couldn't do anything. And that lingered, and, alcohol just began to play a more prevalent role in my life. And that's where kind of like the slippery slope started getting like, I fell down it. Yeah. And drank for the next 10 years to basically suppress crippling anxiety. But, one of the things for me, the reason I kept on kind of like trying to get sober, but not really doing well, because I was always 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because I'd always set these rules for myself. Like, I'm not going to drink on weeknights. I'm not going to drink before 5 p.m. And, and I'm going to make sure that I work really hard and that I'm doing my job, and that's kind of showing that I don't really have a problem.
Yeah. I control this thing. It doesn't control me. Yeah.
Right. And it sounds ridiculous now because like, on the weekends, I'm drinking 2 bottles of wine a night. Wine because it's like, well, I'm not a degenerate. I'm not going to drink like 40s and stuff. I'm going to drink wine. But like, but it was like, it was getting to that point where I'm not a violent drunk. I didn't like, I didn't cause any abuse or anything like that. And I was able to quote unquote function, but that's kind of what I want to communicate to people that may be in that space, is that even though you're kind of like looking at all of the things that are working, even though you're doing this horrible thing, there's a lot that's not working. And there's a lot that, is just like, is broken. Where looking back, I can see clearly. And I was trying to focus on, well, this is why it's working. This is why it's working. And, but in the meantime, it's, when you're doing that, when you're trying to balance the crippling fear and panic with like numbing yourself with alcohol, you're not able to show up or be present as a parent or a husband,
Yeah.
And that's where I was. And so, for about the first 4 years of my daughter's life and the first year of my son's life, I was still I was still in the midst of that. And say that the way that I came to understand kind of that epiphany moment for me, came in 2012 when I broke the last rule that I always said that I never would break, which was I got behind the wheel of a car without knowing I got behind, because I don't remember getting behind the wheel of a car. I came to in the back of a police car after having totaled my car, and fortunately nobody was hurt. But that was just that moment where it was like, my life is out of control. I have no control over my life. And I can, either remove myself from this life, or I could, really get help and figure out, how to do that. And, the very next day, when I was absolutely hopeless, absolutely like out of options and, at risk of criminal, charges and all that kind of stuff, and more afraid than I've ever been, I walked into my first AA meeting, and that's what started my recovery. That was my last drink. So,
wow, yeah, there are a few things you said in there that kind of spoke to me about a couple things. One is my conversation with Sergio when I was chatting with him, and when he quit drinking, and two, I've told myself a couple of those things. Mainly because I'm like, well, and still I'm I don't know if I'm justifying things in my head or if I'm looking at it saying, no, legitimately, like this is, like I don't really know. Right. Cause like I enjoy a glass of scotch at night. Right.
Yeah.
A glass of scotch, maybe an old fashioned I'll make at the house. Something like that. And I have one, maybe two, and then I'm done. I'm like, look, I don't have a problem because it's only two, but
right.
I know alcoholism is in my family, right? Like it's done a lot. And one thing that I've always told myself, that same rule you just said, is like not going to get behind the wheel of a car if I've had more than one.
Right.
And both of my mom's parents were killed by a drunk driver on Christmas Eve when she was pregnant with my oldest sister. So I never got to meet my grandparents, and that's one of those things that I like. Why I've made that rule for myself. It's like there's no way I could justify that. Like especially in 2023, right? We've got enough Ubers and Lyfts and all the stuff that there should be zero reason why anybody should. So, but. Talk to me about talk to me, like literally me, about, okay, what are the things that I might be doing that I'm justifying, or that are signs for somebody to be kind of going, or signs for me that are like, hey, you really are doing those things that you don't think you are. And like, ask me the questions, do everything, like if for not, like use me as the tool, because you struck a thought in my brain. So
yeah. And I'll say, like, alcoholism is an interesting disease because it's the only one I know of. It may not be the only one, but it's the only one that I know of that is self-diagnosed. Like nobody's going to diagnose you as an alcoholic or me, but I diagnosed myself because that's kind of like the root of the issue. The very first number one, thing is admitting that you have a problem, admitting that your life's become unmanageable. And, I'll say for the questions that I would ask myself, because I have to be really careful here, because I don't want to inject myself into how my relationship with alcohol, like is same, because there's no similarities really between different, problem drinkers. But I'll say for me, the biggest problem I had was not necessarily like, and this was something that helped me justify it too, was like, all right, well, if I'm going to stop drinking for a few days, I don't get the shakes. I'm not like, I'm not like convulsing or ending up in the hospital. I don't have that problem. My biggest problem was like, once I took a drink, I cannot stop. Even to this day, like if my mind ever goes in that place that says like, oh, that, glass of beer looks amazing, like I could really go for a beer. Like, I think it through. I mean, I think it through. This is the exercise I do now. Is like, I think it through. I think, all right, well, is that one going to be enough for me? And then I like say, no. I'm like, well, how about two? And I'm like, well, no, because and then I realized that my mind goes to this place where it's never enough. I mean, like there's no end to the number it is. It's like, no, I drink until physically I can drink no more and I pass out. That's just like, that's where my mind goes. I used to control it by like white knuckling it, because I'd only buy 2 bottles of wine. And this is how ridiculous it was. I mean, like, I drink 2 bottles of wine when I drank. But that would be it. I wouldn't like buy any more, so I didn't have any in the house.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, for an alcoholic, that's freaking miserable, because when you're done with it, you're like, I need more, and I'm not done yet. So it was like, so that was how my relationship was. So the idea of like, for me personally, like having like 2 scotches or something like that and being done and being okay, that was like, there's no way I could do that. Even, it just wasn't, it's not in the cards for me to be that kind of person. And then the second thought goes to, well, how about behaviors? Like, am I still behaving like a human being, that an acceptable human being that I'd hope I would, while I'm drinking those, or while I'm drinking it all? And if it's like, well, no, I'm finding that I'm missing memory, or I'm blacking out, or just like maybe snapping too much, or anything like that, then it may be like, that's an element of maybe losing control on my side. And then the final question is like, well, am I really compromising like my performance or my health, like how I show up in the world? Is, am I unable to get up in the morning? Am I unable to, exercise in the way I want to, or or am I feeling like my health is being compromised? Then those are kind of some elements of like, well, maybe I should, maybe I should start to lean into help. And then finally, it's like, if you feel like you can't stop on your own, that's like the time to like really step into support in those communities. And that by far is the scariest part. But because it's like, we don't want to admit that we have a problem. We don't want to admit that we're human for some reason, and I don't know why that is. But and we don't, and we're afraid of the idea of never. Like when we walk into an AA meeting or something like that, even though they constantly say one day at a time, we still have this feeling of never in our minds. Like, I can never drink again. Oh my gosh, I never can. And that's a dangerous word. That's why we have to focus on like, okay, no, just for today, I'm not going to drink. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. Yeah. And I think that it adds like that never thing as well, especially when you associate it to the feelings that you were talking about before, about how it loosened you up. You were able to talk to people. You were able to be comfortable about things. And it's like, I'm never going to get that feeling again either. So like, what have you done to kind of get, or maybe you're still working on it, or maybe you haven't at all yet, but to break down that barrier, to be able to get that feeling now without alcohol? Because that's one of those things that I tell a joke, and it's a joke partially, right? My wife speaks fluent Spanish. Her whole family, they're all Latinas and Latinos, and that. So I go hang out with them. I speak okay Spanish. I have a scotch. I speak much better Spanish, right? Because I break down the barriers, right? Like I'm less fearful of what I sound like. It just helps me calm down enough to be able to say, you know what? I don't care if I sound silly because I'm trying to learn and I'm trying to interact. Where I have a harder time with that unless I have broke those barriers down. And a lot of that is maybe machismo. I want to look like I am, wise all the time and a tough dude and all the stuff. But what have you done to kind of break down some of those walls that alcohol used to be the thing that broke them down?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, I'll say for me, I'm going to talk about Alcoholics Anonymous here, and we're not allowed to, it's something we're not supposed to promote. It's supposed to be attraction. And I totally get why that is. And I'm going to use it in the concept of a community and a framework. And this was what was valuable to me, was that when I was so broken that I was ready to walk into those rooms of recovery, that I was ready to do whatever it took, like whatever I was told. I'd heard of AA, and I think a lot of people have heard of AA, and they have their own perceptions of it. My perception before that was always like, okay, well, if I jump into there, A, it's the never thing. I can never drink again. B, it's a shame thing. I'm going to be shamed for having thoughts of wanting to drink and all this kind of stuff. Like, these guys are going to, shame me for how I feel, which was totally false, by the way. But shame is the feeling that I run from, and that's one of my biggest fears. And then finally that like, it was like, well, I'm too embarrassed to admit that I have a problem and go into that. And when all of that, like when I was broken enough to go into that room and like say, okay, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. It was like I was met by people that were just saying that were willing to help. And this is like the same with lots of different communities. I mean, this was another epiphany moment, because you find it in GoBundance, you find it in other groups that you could find that have what you want. But it was finding that community of people that had what I wanted and were willing to give it away, and where I had to participate. And when I was in that, it was like, okay, and I was willing. I found people were saying, all right, well, here's what you should do to stay sober today. Do this step. Are you powerless over alcohol? Is your life unmanageable? And it was like, okay, well, there's a framework for doing this. And every single day that I was able to do that and participate and engage in that community, become a part of that, I could better identify as a sober person. And it started breaking down that wall, and it actually started taking away a lot of those fears. And it started making me recognize that I wasn't alone. And that's one of the key contributors to getting out of that funk of fear or anxiety or depression or something like that, is knowing that you're not alone and being a part of a community. As a spiritual man, I wonder if you agree that, like, where two or more gathered among us, that's where God is. And that's exactly what I found in those kinds of communities. and the frameworks. It was just, and then, kind of stacking up enough days of that built a point of reference for me that, hey, this sobriety thing, I never thought that I could do this. I thought this was impossible for me. I mean, for a decade of my life, I drank and like, it was like this vicious cycle of crippling fear during the day and drinking at night. I didn't think I could ever get sober. And here I am sober. And now I've got a year of sobriety. And I did it through this community, and I did it through this framework, and the value of other people and all of that. And just the value of consistently taking one step forward at a time. And I was like, well, what else can I do? And it was like that moment in January of 2013, which was like 1 year sober, was like kind of that moment of like, oh, you know what? I wonder what else I can do with my life. I've been given like this grace of like, I should be in jail. It's a matter of inches, and I would have been in jail for my life or for a decade or more. But I have this chance to like really, live and maybe show people that what's possible. And so that's when I started really leaning into other things that, might contribute to that and be a better example as a dad and try to show up in a better way. So that actually put me on the track to, participating in triathlons at a higher level, really digging into working in the business and really trying to take my kids and my family on more adventures and do a lot of that stuff.
We have a lot of extra money now too, because you're not buying 2 bottles of wine all the time, right?
True story.
You could afford some more of that travel.
That's a true story. Yeah, people wonder. Yeah, it's like how do you do all that? It's like that's like $500 a month. I mean, geez.
Yeah, depending on the kind of wine you get, it could be a lot. Yeah. But how did you see that? And did your dad, I'm assuming, was still working in the business at that time, right? So,
yes,
were there problems at the business when that was going on too? Did you see, did your dad approach you or talk to you about it afterward at all? Like how that happened and how it showed up at work?
Yeah, and my dad had talked to me on a few occasions, like when I was still drinking. So one of the things was that I was hiding it from everybody. I mean, I was trying to hide it from everybody. My wife knew. I mean, you don't hide it, but like, my wife knew. But I always had this deep-seated fear that my parents would find out. And that would be like the frightening thing, like was just like that my dad would find out. And then like then like my wife would call my dad or something like that because I was out of hand or something. And then, my dad would talk to me, and then like he would know. But it was just never enough because it was still in my head and I wasn't working through it. And the reality was that, my dad not being an alcoholic or a problem drinker, while I understand that and really appreciate and am grateful that he was there for me in those instances, it wasn't the right person to be there in those instances. I needed an alcoholic. I needed someone who was going through it. It's kind of like, in business, if you're talking to, somebody who might not own apartment complexes about like serious problems with the apartment complex, it's not going to be as effective as talking to a GoBro about, that kind of thing. Yeah. But I was grateful for the support, but afterward, I had a lot of grace there because, within our company, I was given the flexibility to make sure that I was able to recover, and go into the rooms of AA, and I was still, contributing, and there wasn't a lot of what's the word I'm looking for, distraction or anything like that came from recovering. Good.
Yeah. I mean, having that supportive network there is, we talk about it all the time in business stuff. Like you are the 5 people you hang around with most. And like, and if you're, the way I usually say it is if you're around a bunch of drug dealers and gangbangers, you're probably going to be a drug dealer and a gangbanger. If you're around a bunch of people who love to drink alcohol, you're probably going to be doing that, But if you're around a bunch of people who love to, do triathlons and crush it to business, now we're on to a metric for life, right? And especially, if you're around dads who are striving to be better dads,
Absolutely.
How did this help you show up as a dad after that, right? I mean, your kids were 4 and 1 when you quit. Did you notice a difference in how you were able to show up as a dad in that time frame? And then how are you now continuing that thought process to say, okay, well, I know what I was doing there and how it has changed my thought like anything. I want you to run with that.
I'm really lucky that at this point in time, and it wasn't always like this, that I very rarely, if ever, have a inkling to drink, and so like alcohol just it actually makes other people more uncomfortable when I'm in a crowd of people drinking than it does me. So it's I don't feel any kind of draw to it now, which is great, and that's and I really attribute that to this idea of transcendence. Like, transcendence is my favorite word in the world because it literally means just rise above. And it doesn't mean like, you take it away or remove it or kill it or obliterate it. Like I never am going to kill my alcoholism. Or I'm never going to cure it. It's always there. If I take a drink, I'm right back at it. But I feel like I've transcended that desire and I've risen above it by doing, by not just doing the healing work, but by doing the work of growing. And those are sequential steps. Like I talked about, in my early life, I was fighting against fear. I was battling it. I was suppressing it and all of that stuff. When I finally was broken enough to go and get sober, I essentially took the healing step. That's where we face fear. And I'd look at facing fear not as fighting fear anymore, but it's like this acceptance that fear is a part of us and that we have to kind of live in it. We have to immerse ourselves in it in order to get to the other side. But once we get to the other side, we have this opportunity to actually embrace it and to actually see that fear as a gift. And so how I show up in the world today is as a father, in my business and things like that is I'm able to look at that fear that I see and that I have this amplified feeling of in my life, and see that as a gift, because when it has shown up and I haven't fought against it, it has typically been a signal that I have an opportunity to grow, to become something better. When I walked into AA, I was more afraid than I've ever been. And looking back, that was the best decision I've ever made. When I was able to, walk with my daughter into, treatment centers and things like that, I was more afraid than I've ever been, but it was the right thing to do. And I was there for her. When I was, when we were making the decision on whether or not to homeschool or to take our kids, it's like, well, I'm afraid we might make the wrong decision, but we're here for it. We're in it. It's a gift. And when the decision to take over the family business and move it into the 4th generation. Yeah, it's a scary decision, but it's a gift. And so that's kind of how I've looked at that. And so showing up as a father today, not just am I just more clear, more present in that sense, and by no means perfect. I think I still spend way too much time in the business, and not enough with the kids. But I'm aware, and I think I'm trying to remedy that as we go.
Do you have conversations with your kids about that thought process you have on fear and how, one thing we look at an image of courage, right? And a lot of people look at courage as being fearless, and I think that's completely incorrect, right? And I think a lot of other people do too. Courageous is having the fear and pushing through it anyways, right? So, and being able to take action anyways. So do you have that conversation about you obviously have transcended that particular portion of your life, and you want to you've shared it with the world in your book, and you talk about it with your podcast. And how do you talk about it with your kids so that they can learn? Because I wish that I would have, because I was the same boat. I played football, and I got in there, and I was scared to death to get hit, and I didn't want to go do the things. But I mean, I didn't hit 5 feet tall or 100 pounds till 10th grade, so it took me, like, I was always a small guy. So that was always in the back of my head, but I wish that somebody would have talked to me about some of that fear and how to push through that. So how do you talk to your kids now about that fear? I would imagine, especially with your daughter, with the trials she's going through.
Yeah. And I try to, I try to talk to them as a sense that this is to normalize it in a lot of ways, that this is normal, to feel fear, and that it's okay. And that feeling uncomfortable is okay. And that's one of the important things. I mean, we are so drawn to comfort. I mean, because we have it so readily available now, that it's just like, well, why would I choose discomfort instead of comfort? It's like, well, sometimes we need to see that fear as just like a healthy friend that's telling us something. And a lot of times our brain is the enemy by, interpreting that fear the wrong way and telling us, garbage things like, like my brain would tell me, oh, you can't do that. You're not an Ironman athlete. Are you kidding me? You can't do that. Why don't you go back to drinking beer and feeling sorry for yourself? But that was like, that's not the fear telling me that. That's just my brain interpreting it, And so I try to convey to them that, and I think the thing about fear is, I mean, like, we can be there, and fear and fatherhood is like that we can be there to guide our kids and help them to try to understand it, but they're still going to feel it, and they're still going to have to kind of work through it and go through it, because that's always the battle. I feel it's like, well, I want to make sure they understand what's happening, but I also want to make sure that they go through the experiences too, so that they can grow from it. Does that make sense? Like, it's just, I don't want to shield them from the challenges of like experiencing it, and
of course,
but I want to make sure that they understand, that they work through it. Yeah.
So, I mean, working through it is something that could go a bunch of different directions. So, like, where's that point where you say, okay, well, how do I see they're at a pivot point. Do I let them go through this particular portion, or is this now is the time? Like, I mean, there's no perfect thing. I'm just curious on your thoughts. On when you feel is the right time to come in and like, as I struggle with some of the stuff with my son. Like, just today, Adam was trying to go buy a bottle of water. He's got this fear of communicating with people, so he gets real shy. And part of me, I think, is my fault, because I used to tell him that daddy was shy when he was a kid too, and blah, blah, blah. So now he's just like, oh, okay, it's okay to be shy. I'm just going to be shy. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not telling you that you should be shy. I'm telling you that you could work through it. And I just didn't communicate that well. So trying to figure out, like, okay, at what point do I really just step in and work on this, or just kind of let him figure it out? And because the fear could be debilitating. Like, it can, if we let it get out of control, it can really get to the point where you just don't do things in life because you're afraid of it. So, like, tell me about a time, maybe that's an easier way to say it, on where you chose to come in and have that conversation about fear and how to push through it in a certain scenario.
Yeah. And I think, so, yeah. And here's where I might be struggling through it a bit, is because, I think what I've discovered is that the times that I've done that have not been necessarily helpful. Like, I might just, like, if I think people experience fear in a different way, and for my son or daughter, it's like, they kind of take after, they kind of have like a little bit more outbursty kind of stuff, like, gosh, like it comes out as like, more aggression and things like that, which when I don't know if, like, it's like kind of like when you tell people, hey, calm down, and it's like, yeah, probably not a good idea. But like, but that's like always been like my fear has always popped up, like, what is it, reverting or going inward and like just quieting down and getting really, so it's more flighty on my end. But so when I've tried to do that, I think I've escalated, and I tend to be, like, I think, viewed in the family amidst these things as kind of the escalator in those situations. So I'm more of like, in the moment, I'm I have to kind of say, look, it's probably a good idea just to take some time and, just like, do what you need to do on this. But one of the best things that we've done, I think the most helpful thing that we've done for all of our collective relationships is, I think everybody in the family has a therapist, has their own therapist. I know that sounds super expensive, not as expensive as drinking, but still pretty expensive. But it's been hugely valuable. Like my son has somebody that is unique to him that he can talk to, that he trusts, that can that can help him work through a lot of those. And that's not like I'm outsourcing like fatherhood or anything like that. I'm just giving another outlet because I'm not the right person at the age that they're at to be the one to, I guess, help them navigate the fear or that part of it. I'm like kind of the, but I'm still like the guide in a lot of ways, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does.
Yeah. So and then same with my daughter.
I think that's wise. I mean, there was one Fambundance trip that we were on where they talked about, how hard do we all work to find good coaches for ourselves and our business and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then what are we doing to provide that same opportunity for our kids that put the right people that match what they need? Because like I have a coach for my son's golf stuff. Like he really wants me to do the coaching. I'm like, dude, I'm not a golf coach. I am moderately okay at golf. You are going to be absolutely crushing me soon. It's not my job to teach you how to golf. I need to get you somebody to help you how to golf. So, maybe the same thing is working with the fear side of the house as well, because it's, if I still struggle with these things, and that's where I try to be vulnerable with them, right? In that sense, and say, hey, these are the fears that Dad still has, and these are the things that go on in my brain, so that they know that they're not alone in this, right? That there's other, but it doesn't mean that I'm the right person to really help them face their fears, like, we were doing a rock climbing wall at, I don't remember where it was, Universal Studios or something. So Adam was climbing. He loves those things, right? So he gets up and he's used to doing it at Sky Zone. In Sky Zone, there's like these big, like puffy blocks of foam on the bottom. So you just jump off the wall and you land in the puffy blocks of foam. Well, here, there wasn't. It was one of those little tether things, and you just kind of lean off the wall and it lowers you down slowly. He gets 3/4 of the way up and he looks down and he says, Dad, how do I get down? And I was like, but you're attached to the thing. Like you just fall off the wall. He's like, no, I don't. Like he started freaking out. And I was like, dude, you climb these things all the time. What is going on? Like, and it was like a, man, this is going to take some work. And it was funny because it got to the point where when I finally told him, I said, okay, fine, you can just come down. That he finally chose to go up. Because he was like, no, I'm getting down. How do I get down? And I was like, buddy, you're okay. You got it. Push. I'm trying to encourage him to go. And then I was finally like, you know what, buddy, you're fine. Just start to work your way down. And then he looked down and started to go. And he's like, nope, I'm ringing the bell. And he started going up. And I was like, well, right when I thought I was trying to, like, I don't know what the right answer is. I can't figure it out. But so, like, I don't know what to do to encourage him to do certain things. But it's I don't know. It's a trial and error, I guess, everywhere I go.
Yeah, well, I think that's the key message of parenting in general is just tell your kids the opposite of what to do. They will do the opposite. So.
There we go. Yeah. I want you to climb. I'll tell you to get down, and then you'll know how to climb. So yeah, that's valid. Yeah. But man, oh man, that's funny.
Yeah.
But what sort of things do you, to pivot a little bit, what sort of fun things do you guys do as a family? I think I read that you like to travel a lot and do, like you got a camper. Is that right? You guys go out camper? Yeah. So tell me fun things you guys like to do.
Yeah. So we just got about a year ago, we just got a Sprinter van. So we were one of those families with a converter Sprinter. And we're starting to take that out a bit more. And we just got back from a fun like Montana trip that we did, like, up through Montana. It was really great. So that's a lot of fun. We my parents live in Hawaii now, so that gives us a nice little vacation destination to go to. So we travel out there, just try to go on. And that was one of the reasons too. Like during COVID, I think one of the benefits that happened was we were able to close down our corporate office and sold the corporate office. And I was so grateful for this because I've always been an advocate of being able to have great family or life just, at home balance with work. And, the idea of going into an office was always rubbing on me. Why are we doing this? Why? And I understand it to some degree that some people do need to go in the offices, but from our standpoint, it was just like, well, I'm going to work. I'm sitting in 2 hours of traffic. I get to the office and I go into my office, and occasionally I'll talk to people. And, we can actually do that on these devices that we now have. So anyway, COVID allowed us to close down shop, and it gave a good excuse for that. And voila, it worked. And everybody at home working. So that really allowed us to kind of go on like more mini adventures at home and do some of those things. So like, it also allowed us to have the geographical arbitrage to move away from California into Colorado, where there's just more outdoor life, more stuff we can do without battling the traffic, the fires, all that stuff, and just have a higher quality of life out here. So we're and more access to different parts of the country, which I've never been to, and that's been exciting.
Awesome. Yeah. And I love that area out there. It's a beautiful, Colorado itself is just so gorgeous. I love traveling out there and visiting and doing stuff. So I'm pretty jealous. I would love to, personally, I would really want a house in Colorado. I live in Florida, so I'd love to have a house in Colorado to be able to go to in the winter, be able to it doesn't matter what time of year. I'd love all of the outdoor stuff that's in Colorado. So whether it's hiking, biking, snowboarding, whatever. So yeah, it's a beautiful area you chose to go to. So good on you.
Well, there's a few GoBros that split their time between Colorado and Florida. You should just join the. They should have a microtribe or something.
And I'll totally jump in on that one and try to figure out how to do it. I talked to Kurt a lot about it, and because he does the same thing. But so focus. I want to go back to the kids in the business. Are your kids at all involved right now in the family business, and what are their thoughts thus far about the family business?
So I have not introduced them to the idea of joining the family business, and it's not my intention to do so. So they're not involved in it now. I mean, only to the extent that say we were involved early on, but. With regard to our company, we have going through four generations. There's certainly a legacy aspect to it, but there was also, for me, kind of coming into the business, there was a bit of an excitement there, but there was a bit of an obligation too, and that I want to not protect my kids from, but help my kids avoid, so that they can be in charge of their own destiny. Because there's a lot thinking that well, this is the path for me, going into the family business and doing this thing. While it was rewarding, and while I'm happy to run a company, I'm very blessed with what I do. Early on, it also kind of it narrowed my focus, or narrowed my mindset on what else I could do. And I think that's where I was trapped in my own head early on, was I'm just doing this business thing, kind of just biding my time until I learn some things, or they have a place for me, or whatever, or what have you. And it didn't feel very fulfilling, or as fulfilling as I thought it would early on. And I just didn't give myself, and this is it. There's nobody in the previous generations to blame, but it didn't give me the I guess the courage or the wherewithal to actually think outside of what else is possible? What else is what else can I be doing, or could I do more things at once, or is there other opportunities? So I want to give my kids the freedom to look at what they want to achieve and do it, and not be restricted by these ideas of artists can't make money, so it's not a good career, or this isn't a good path because it's just too hard to get into. It's no, I figured out the exact opposite by being surrounded by people people at Go Abundance. I've seen wow, these people are doing amazing things that I've heard in my life. Only that it is impossible, but they're showing us that it can be done.
Yeah.
So it's that's incredible. So just in that process of surrounding ourselves with the community, we've been able to make some changes. But it's a long form answer of just saying, I don't want to introduce them. If they find interest in it, I'm going to sit down with them and have a very, very clear conversation with them about what that looks like. and what that means, and the challenges and the difficulties. Because there are a lot of challenges and difficulties that I didn't expect or understand. It's even in a family business, especially in a family business.
Yeah.
It's very lonely being in the top spot, because all of a sudden you could become a totally different person to the people that even your family members, which is challenging. And so I have a lot more respect for my dad on that front, for what he went through, what he had to go, and he ran the company for 25 years and grew the company to where it is today. And just understanding, like, wow, I get it. And if I ever saw you as an individual, as CEO dad over dad at any point, I'm sorry, because it's pretty lonely.
Man, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Did your dad have conversations with you about that as you were, coming into the business? You felt like, it sounded like you said you felt like it was going to be like the path is already laid. You got to ride on it. But like, what kind of conversations did your dad have with you about the business as you were growing up?
Yeah, we didn't have a lot, and so I wonder, and we still haven't had a lot about how he felt back then. But I wonder how he felt when he was kind of building the foundation for the business that would become. Because that if he didn't want us, like if he wanted to avoid us joining the company too, because to avoid a lot of the struggles that he was having. But I don't know that for sure. But by the time I graduated from college, it was clear he was excited to have me come in. And while I didn't have any expectations with regard to that, so we're a pretty sizable company. We're 150 employees. There's about 15 family members within the company at various areas. So I didn't really have any expectations about what positions I would be in. But my goal, of course, was to build some opportunities and things like that. I think that where I was stuck was just I was doing some roles that didn't really fit who I was, in sales and things like that. I'm just not a sales guy, and it didn't really. I didn't really find my vibe, and that wasn't the company's fault. That wasn't anybody previous. That was just my fault for not really digging in, and also being in the midst of struggling with my own problems. I just wasn't healthy at that time to understand that. But I think, my dad did he was very intentional about not influencing the outcome of things, or saying like, hey, you should do this or that. He really wanted us to forge our own. And when I say us, my brother and sister are also in the business. He really wanted us to forge our own path, almost to the opposite degree, where it was, we were facing like both ends of the non-family management was kind of resentful of us for being in the business, but we also weren't getting a lot of direction or guidance to do that. So we were getting, that was kind of the way, and I understand where he was coming from, but it was also kind of like, we just didn't have a lot of visibility into what was happening or anything like that.
So you said that your dad let you forge your own path, but yet you also said earlier that you felt like you still had to take that path anyways. So where did the feeling that you had to take the path come from if he was saying that he wanted you to forge your own path? Where did the obligation come from on your side?
So that was pretty much internal. So that was my feeling, like, and really my limiting belief. It was my feeling that like maybe a self-worth problem or something like that, but that I was stuck, even though I might not have been stuck. It was just like, there were many, many layers between where I was at in the company and where my dad was. So the only communication we had was like really family things and events. So so my primary communication with managers and things like that was just kind of like, well, this is all we have right now. And I just didn't have the internal tools or the internal mindset to actually, to push harder. And again, I was in a bad mental state at that time anyway, just with all of my personal stuff.
Okay. So, how do you see it? Because it almost sounded like you're trying to go down a similar path with your kids that your dad went with you, but yet you still felt the obligation to go. So I'm just curious, like how are you going to try to make it a different path so that they don't feel that obligation? But I mean, obviously, you mentioned the obligation was internal, so they're going to have different feelings than you, more than likely, just because they're different human beings. But how are you going to try to make it different besides that intentional conversation you mentioned?
Well, I appreciate you asking that question, because that's really like the first time I thought of it in that way, in terms of like, that I might be doing the same thing that, and yeah, but I think so I try to be very open and honest with them now about like what's happening in the business, and some of the challenges we face, and all of that. And they've never made any indication that that's a direction that they would want to go. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, where I'm at now is as I engage with my kids, I really just try to open the door to, like, when they talk about a passion or something that they have in their mind. My goal with the mindset that I have is to encourage them to follow whatever it is. Not think of not think of this financial security first. They'll figure out a way to take care of that. But if they have a drive to do something, whether it be engineering or music or art or something like that, let's lean into that passion and think of a business model or some kind of opportunity that you can get into with that. I mean, I don't know if this was the same way that you grew up, but I mean, I grew up during that time, I wasn't exposed to the idea of like, you can invest your way to like a freedom of lifestyle and all this kind of stuff. It's a relatively new concept. And for us, it was like, yeah, go to college, find a career, and stick with it until you retire. And so I think that perspective is shifting now. And so I'm trying to kind of help my kids understand that, even as I try to learn about it from other people who have gone way far down much farther down that path than I have.
Okay. Yeah, that's. I mean, I think it's going to be a constant battle in your brain trying to figure out, how to pull that off. Because I'm doing the same thing with my kids. Because like my son told me the other day, he's like, I either want to be in the Air Force like you and mommy, or I want to be a police officer. And which is like me and mommy, right? Like we do the same. Yeah. And I was thinking to myself, man, I do not want that for you, right? Like, I mean, I want it. I grew up and it was like I went straight into the military out of high school because, well, that's what my parents did. I don't know any difference. Like, college was one of those that, that's what people with money do. I don't like, that's not me. I'm just going to go join the military. So, I mean, if that's what he ends up wanting to do, if that's what they end up wanting to do, then I'm totally down with all three of them doing that, if that's truly what they want to do. But I want them to be able to forge their own path and chase those things. And it's a fine line between like holding puppet strings and just letting them go off in the wild. I've yet to figure out how I want to do it, but the conversations I like to have are just like more along the let's just chase your thought process down, because I want it to be authentically you, not just because that's what dad and mom do, like, and I don't know. I think it's only going to get harder as they become older, not easier, so I'm trying to see if I can make the conversation easier later right now. So I don't know if that's a possible thing.
Well, yeah, I'm curious to know your thought process on this, because obviously I'm struggling with it too with our kids, and I think it's just you're right, it is a constant struggle. But like, having gone through that, the military background, through the path you took, which was obviously very structured, path, and then building a business now, is that something you would encourage would you more likely to encourage your kids to start down the path of like building a business and then finding the thing that they want to do, or what are your thoughts on that?
So the way that I keep talking to because like even my 4-year-old, like the 8-year-old and the 4-year-old will talk back and forth about what they want to do and what they want to, with the 4-year-old, it changes every other week because he's 4, right? But it allows me to have good conversations. At least in my brain, they're good conversations. Whether or not they are for them, I don't know. But I try to kind of meld their desires with my desires for them, right? So Rourke, I think it was Rourke or maybe it was Adam, I don't remember which one, but said they talked about, oh man, it'd be so cool to be a construction worker because then I could do blah, blah, blah. And I was like, it'd be even better. I was like, if you were to grow or buy a construction company, right? Because then you could still get on that construction equipment that you think would be so much fun, but you get to manage the process and like be able to control the company and be able to control the growth. Where if you're just the one driving the tractor, you don't get to do that and try to have that sort of conversation. So where it's almost the well, maybe not quite, but I was going to say it's almost like the buy then build type thing, right? Where I don't know if you've read that book, but if you haven't, it's phenomenal. But like I want them to be able to think differently because I had zero concept of even really what a savings account was, let alone investing or anything until I got married. So my life completely flipped upside down when I got married. Like it was so eye-opening. My wife is a saver by nature. Like, I mean, her mom was born and raised in Cuba. So I think that just like that background and history is like, hey, you just hoard what you have and make sure that, you only put it out for the things that you need to. And for me, I was a spender because that's what I saw, so I just want to show the options as much as possible, that what's out there. And I talk about my business a lot, and like the flexibility that it gives us, and I'm doing what I can to softly steer without taking control of the wheel. If I can show some guardrails but still let them control it, that'd be great. But I just want my guardrails to be really wide. Because again, if they want to join the military, then go and join the military. But just know that you have other options.
Right. Yeah. It's a tough. I mean, and I feel like that's like the best way we could go about doing that is try to provide some guidance, let them forge their own path. And really, I think for me, it's like where my kids are at now, they want nothing to do with the family business. It's just like, they're teenagers and all this kind of stuff. But, my thought is like, if they're in college and they see, a particularly good time happening at Hill Brothers and like, we're doing well, and they're saying like, yeah, well, what would, and I'm like, okay, well, we're going to have a very serious conversation about what that looks like and really map out the details on how that looks. And there's a level of, I think, transparency that has to happen there about like, what the expectations might be, where their mental space is at and how, and what the potential opportunities might be versus what their capabilities are. I mean, we made a lot of changes since I started within the company too. It was like, when I started, it was kind of like, well, yeah, there's a job in R&D. Why don't you just jump in there and do that? And, for 150 person company back in 2002, that's still kind of a interesting way of doing it. But now it's like, we've developed systems, we've developed like, we're developing like more personality profiles for how people fit the right people in the right seats. We're running on EOS, we're doing all of these things. And so they have to fit into that whole concept of it. And they have, and if they want to be joining the company, and if you're to ask me personally right now, would I want them to join the company? The answer is probably no. Not because I don't like, the company, and I don't like what I do, but I feel, I guess, a sense of discomfort with, the idea that they would want to do something out of obligation to maybe make me feel good. I know that was certainly part of my rationale was like, I wanted to make, make my dad proud kind of thing. I wanted to do that. And, if I achieve that, maybe I think, done a pretty good job, but is that really the thing that, or do we want to really serve the world in the best way we know how? My kids are brilliant. They have so much opportunity and they have so much, capability to give so much to the world. And I want them to serve the way in the best way they know how that aligns with the way that they're going to be fulfilled. So that's what my hope is for them.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough balance, that's for sure. Right? I mean, do you know Frank Smolin?
No. Oh no, I do. Yeah.
Go Abundance guy. Yeah. So he's another one that, I mean, his family business, and I chatted with him a little bit. I think the podcast I had with him was released last week, or at the time of this recording anyways, last week. but he's been struggling with the same thing, so it might be good for you guys to get on a call and just kind of say, hey, how do you guys, what are you thinking? How are you working back and forth? Because he also had brothers in the business, and so it was interesting chatting with him about all that, because like my business isn't like ADPI is not a family business, right? Like we're a bunch of military folks and military spouses that are running it. But I've got my own personal investment stuff that I'd love to be able to share with the boys, and now, boy, this has been a struggle over the last 3 months. I keep saying the boys, forgetting that now I have a daughter. Not forgetting that I have a daughter, but for the last years, I've been just saying the boys. But the kids, I'd love to get the kids involved with all of this stuff. Like, I mean, I've convinced Adam to invest in properties. He's ready to go. Like,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So I talked to him about investing, and do you know who the Tuttle twins are?
No.
So the Tuttle twins are these guys that's they started off in like sales and something or other, but they've got a series out. So I've got Angel Studios or Angel something or other, but it's an app that I've got on my Apple TV that I can watch all of my Netflix and all the stuff that I can put like different filters on, so the kids don't hear certain curse words, or it takes away certain scenes that they don't need to be seeing and stuff like that. But the Tuttle twins have like a series on there that teaches kids about all sorts of different, history stuff. And there was one they were watching today about Bitcoin, and it's like teaching about Bitcoin. All this, like it was super cool to go through. And now I'm completely forgetting where I was going with this. What was I talking about before that?
Family business kind of stuff. Yeah.
I don't even remember. Like, I don't know what was, I don't remember what I was going to say, but, boy, it was really good too. I promise it would have been like mind-blowing, life-changing for you. But now I can't remember what the heck it was.
You're
a little blurry. Trying to do one of these little things.
I was trying to turn off the video and make sure that I could no, that didn't work.
Come on. No, it didn't. Come on.
Did it? Hey. All right. Well, hang on one second. Let me just shut it off for like a few seconds, see if that works. Sorry about that.
You're fine.
Yeah, little
I mean, I brought in a crying kid earlier, so I mean, I can't complain about your camera.
Come on. Okay, maybe if I shut the thing and then open it. Voila.
Okay, there you go.
See, that's why I should have gone into IT. I don't know, but anyway, I
started off and restarted.
But I think, to your point about like that first generation of like, you've built this thing and you want them to be a part of like that the investment kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of value too, though. I mean, there's a big, I guess there's a big difference though with regard to like the generational aspect. From 1 to 2, it's like there's this exciting. You're still building it. You might be building it together. There's a lot of first and second generation businesses out there. Whereas like when you get farther down the chain, it becomes more like running an organ, like not like a what's the word I'm looking for? Because you start to get more like in the fourth generation, you have the second cousins, you know what I mean? Like these are people that I've barely met before, and they're like saying, "Hey, how's my dividend looking this year?" And I'm like, okay. And it's just like so it's like it's a little less connected as a family than it would be like right in that initial first and second generation.
Yeah.
Which is like super powerful. There's just this idea that like as you evolve with the family and the generations, there just gets to be more more management of the family kind of stuff, which becomes very that becomes its own challenge too. And ownership kind of gets diluted into like many family members and things like that. So to that degree, it's like, when people think of like, oh, you're running a family business, so you own it. I'm like, no. It's like, yeah, no, this is like there's like, there's a about 60 owners that are, still running this whole thing. And it's not like so it's so,
there's a lot to work with. Jeez.
Yeah. So yeah. there's a bit of a master class I could probably do on how not to do succession planning, but
yeah. I really just want to be able to set myself up enough that the kids see opportunity wherever they look, because there is opportunity everywhere you look. Like there's it's all what's up here, right? It's all what's up in your head, right? Because if you tell yourself that there's opportunity nowhere, there's going to be opportunity nowhere. And I'm saying this right after just talking to somebody recently about how difficult it is to find real estate deals right now. There are things out there. There's got to be, right? There's got to be. I don't know where they are, but I know they're out there. But I want the kids to know, like, hey, you have opportunity in front of you. You have a wealth of knowledge at your fingertips, whether it's mom, dad, grandpa, a GoBundance friend, like whoever. You have got an ample amount of opportunity in front of you. If me, a guy who when I was young literally used to shake up powdered milk, right, because we didn't buy the regular milk, we had to buy the powdered milk. Can eventually get to the point where I'm buying multi-million-dollar apartment buildings, then my kids certainly have a leg up on it and an opportunity in front of them, and that I hope they don't spoil. And by saying that, I'm saying that I hope I don't spoil it for them, right? Because I can really, and I think it was a little bit in what you were saying too. We can really, tamper down what the excitement that they may have in one way, shape, or form about anything. And I really don't want to do that. Like I want to be able to see that excitement that they have and help grow it, not stamp it down.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the bigger fears I have as a parent is the fact that, I'm sitting here talking about my dad and he was wonderful. And I'm talking about some of the places I wish he would have done or things like that. The thing is he did a great job of the best he can. And so are we. And the thing that terrifies me is there's something that we've done that we might not know that's screwing them up, at some point in their lives.
Scares the heck out of me.
So it's like, what is that thing? What's my blind spot? What are we doing wrong? And it's like, well, I just got to step back and kind of accept it, let go, let God, and just do the best we can, and know that if there's that we're not perfect, I guess, and just hope for the best. And I want to give my kids the sensation and the belief to know. I guess that the one thing that I want to get them to understand is that within the grounds of the law and physics, that they are free, that they have freedom to do whatever that they want to do, and if that means hey, joining the company, they don't like it, they want to leave, then they leave, then hey, that's great, or they want to start their own thing and do that, that's great, and just hopefully guide them in a direction that is moral and ethical, and that they enjoy and gives them fulfillment and happiness. So yeah.
And that's, I think, all that most parents want for their kids, right?
Yeah.
To be able to see that joy and happiness on their face all the time. I don't think that's a reasonable expectation, because they're going to be upset at us. Again, going back to the fact that my 4-year-old came in here and was crying on camera already. But
it's a real life, folks. Yep.
So tell me a spot maybe right now as a father that you're really struggling with, maybe I might be able to help out with, or maybe somebody listening will be able to help out with, or just something that you want to be able to chat about and be vulnerable about and kind of work through.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges that I'm having right now is is everything's kind of competing for attention. Running a company, building a personal brand, and trying to have some fulfillment there, and making sure I'm being intentional about this time with my kids. And I think that's the ongoing. I think I would say that's probably a big challenge for me, as far as making sure I have the time and making sure I'm creating the right amount of energy for that. So I know some of the things I'm working through right now are just well, within Hill Brothers, what can I delegate? I need a sales and marketing director. I need to delegate certain tasks. We need to get through some certain things, but I want to make sure I'm being intentional in making that space to make sure I have time for the family too.
So what are you doing right now to make sure that happens?
So right now I am actively digging into find particularly a sales and marketing director, because that is taking up a lot of my time. Currently, I'm operating as CEO and sales and marketing, and it's a lot of work, and I'm frankly just kind of spreading myself too thin. Mm-hmm. So finding that role, getting that integrated, and then allowing myself to actually free up that time to actually spend would be hugely valuable. And then the other thing I'm doing is, and a lot of this is just hiring other people, which I'm not good at. I've never done a lot before. I've done it a few times within Hill Brothers, but we don't hire a lot. We just have we don't have a lot of turnover. But even in my personal brand, it's like, oh, you know what? I'm not making a ton of revenue right now, but I need to start hiring, which is also a scary prospect because I can't be doing it all. I know we were talking a little earlier about the idea of producing a podcast and doing all of these aspects, and that's those are some areas where it's like I need to be able to delegate a lot of this stuff that I don't have to be doing, so that I can free my time up to actually be more present. That would be valuable.
So what? Let's say you have your hire right now. You just found your sales and marketing director, and they're in the seat. What are you doing different tomorrow? What's going on your schedule and what's coming off your schedule tomorrow?
So what's coming off my schedule are a number of meetings that I have to have for sales. And what that means is I open the door to my office and I walk outside and I sit down with my daughter and I just have conversations, or I play volleyball with her, or I just be more present in the home with them. And I stop thinking or not thinking. That's not I'll never stop doing that. Although my wife and kids will probably tell me that I never do it in the first place. but I stop, I guess, ruminating on work related issues in that case, once I start to delegate a lot of that stuff out. So I can spend more time actually just being present with the kids, taking them to the water park, taking off weekdays to actually go take the van out and do some things, doing the things that they want to do and not forcing them to do the things that I think we should do because of father and kid stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah.
How much time would you say is split up right now, CEO to sales and marketing?
It's probably about 60-40 right now.
Okay.
And so I need to spend more time on that visionary aspect of CEO versus sales and marketing.
So if it were me sitting in that seat, that would be my fear, is that I'm going to fill that other 40% with the visionary side and sitting and ruminating on that stuff. So how are you planning to be intentional about doing that volleyball, going out there and talking and getting in the van? Like there's, again, the planning is priceless. The plans are useless. So let's working through the planning side of it. Like what is it that you are going to do that is going to help you be intentional with that, as opposed to just filling the void?
Yeah. So my wife and I, we have the most valuable. So I'd say EOS has been valuable for our business, right? Mm-hmm. We've implemented an EOS family thing too, where my wife and I... I was just thinking
about doing something like that. Anyway, sorry.
It's so great. Yeah. So we implemented a level 10 meeting in our own household. Nice. Where my wife and I meet. And this was, obviously the struggles my daughter's been through, she hasn't been involved in that. We haven't forced our son to be involved in it, but we may start to include them in a secondary meeting of that nature too. But in that meeting, it's been so valuable because we've been able to hold ourselves accountable to these kinds of things. We've been able to set the tasks, set the goals, and use the very same, I think, ways that I add value within Hill Brothers to add value in the home, which sounds very cold and callous when it comes out of my mouth, but it's actually, it works because it makes it so that, those things get on the schedule and it just doesn't get squeezed by other stuff. Yeah. When it's on a to-do list, when we're talking through this and we're saying, all right, my to-dos for this week are, play volleyball 3 or 4 times with Sarah, or, do this with Zachary, or what have you. then I can, showing up the next week and say, I didn't do that because of Hill Brothers stuff. Wow, man, I look like a jerk. So there's an accountability piece there. And I think that kind of thing helps to put that in place. But yeah, that's level 10 meeting has been invaluable for us.
I hope that you don't have any wrong person, wrong seat issues inside the family. That'll be an interesting one to work out.
Yeah, if it is, it's me. So that makes me nervous.
Hiring and firing based off of our core values.
Right.
And sorry, Pops, you're just not cutting it. So
I don't dare to put together an accountability chart. That's for sure.
No people analyzer, please. No people analyzer. Right. Thank you. Yeah, I've been truly enjoying EOS, and we're implementing it in ADPI, and it's been interesting. When did you start implementing it?
So we started implementing it at Hill Brothers about a year and a half ago, and it's been amazing for us. It's been the world, and one of the within the first few years of taking over the company, one of the biggest challenges is like, all right, some of your family becomes your employees. Some of these legacy employees have worked there for 40 years. See, this new guy come in, and he's a young guy you used to remember in diapers or whatever. And it's like, all right, yeah, okay, we're reporting to him, yeah, okay. And so like it getting to that place where there was the credibility and accountability. We needed a system, and I realized that we need a system that demonstrates that this is the Hill Brothers way. This is the way we're doing things.
Yeah.
And that part has been just incredibly invaluable. It's improved our accountability and our structure. It's opened our eyes to things to blind spots. And, over that time, our revenue has grown 50%, for a legacy company. That's huge. So we're building to a more sustainable organization. So it's been very beneficial to us.
What kind of struggles did you have at the beginning of implementing EOS?
We weren't accustomed to. So our organization, when I took it over, we kind of plateaued, and then we were starting this downward kind of trajectory of like, not a lot of new ideas, not a lot of things or anything like that, and so my first year, we like dropped down to, we were starting to lose a little money. And the next year we lost a lot of money. And then, it was like, okay, well, we've got to really start turning this thing around. That's when we started thinking about systems, but we kind of scaled down our expenses to the bare minimum and started rebuilding a little bit at that time. So when we implemented it, we were just kind of like that, coming back to that break even point. And so the hardest thing about implementing it for us was selling it to, a lot of the employees who hadn't been used to a system before. But that was hard with an organization of 150. But ultimately getting the course, five of us on the leadership team aligned that this was the right thing to do. That was the core thing to get it moving in the right direction. Hey again.
One thing that it's opened our eyes to a lot of different things going on inside the company that some wrong person, wrong seat issues and all the things that we just didn't, as we were growing, it didn't really, we just plugged people where we needed help. Right. And now it's like, no, we need to put people where they're the best asset in that spot. Right. And that's been an eye-opening experience trying to work through all of that. But it's kind of led to, I think at the beginning, and we're working through that now, but at the beginning, it's almost felt like it was leading to less like actual sales happening. And I don't know if that was just a byproduct of all the changes happening and that's going to be going on. Like, I don't know if that's a normal thing. I don't know, we're being told that it is, but it doesn't feel normal, right?
Right.
But we started working through it, and it's on the right trajectory now. But I wasn't sure, like, is that something that you saw as well, or maybe because you were already on the downslope, anyways, it was not really noticeable at that point.
Yeah, we didn't see a lot of loss in sales. What we did see was a little more focus, which was great.
Yeah, we definitely got that.
Yeah, and that was helpful because as a chemical company, our product. I mean, we have something like 2,000 item codes, and it's just it's and the ways in which these can be shipped. There's a lot of complexities within our organization, naturally built-in complexities, and so so it allowed us to really look at our company as like, all right, focusing down on the right kind of sales, what we're really good at, what our key core uniques are, which is like, we realize that we're really good within this geographical range of 100 miles of our facilities. We're really good with bulk deliveries, and doing this kind of stuff, but we do a lot of like, package stuff. So why are we doing as much of that? And so it allowed us to kind of shift our focus without just like cutting the cord completely, but like, moving the needle or moving the trajectory in the right direction to make sure that we're focused on the right things. So sales haven't in volume haven't gone down. But I have heard that is a part of it, and certainly uncomfortable.
It was and now my daughter has arrived. Well, my au pair is stealing my blueberries now. What the heck? We're just coming in here eating my blueberries.
You guys got a lot of blueberries over there.
Come say hello.
It's too sweet.
Say hi. Say hi.
No. Oh, she's cute.
She is. I agree. You should see her mom. That's why. Huh. Yeah. Well, did I forget to put that in? Well, now I'm being told I need to get to work and go put in an air filter. All right.
Nice.
So, man, oh man. I wish that they loved their sister.
Yeah.
You guys are crazy.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Here you go. All right, you guys just take the blueberries. Go ahead. Take the blueberries. These crazy kids, I tell you what. So what do you do if your kids come into your office and try to steal all your stuff while you're in the middle of a podcast? Have you ran into that yet?
I have not. Fortunately, fortunately the kids are at such an age where they do not want to be on camera and don't want to do anything like that. So they're just leave me alone. Yeah. There's like a switch that flips when that happens too, by the way.
I don't know if you just heard that. My son wants to light a blueberry on fire.
Oh.
It's just because it's rotten? Oh. Well, maybe
blueberry
after I
flambe.
get off this call. Yeah. Yep. Let's just leave the rotten blueberry right here on my desk. Sounds great. Man, oh man. These kids, I tell you what. Well, oh man. Anyways, on that happy note, is there anything that you want to cover? Anything else that's been on your mind you want to chat about? Any questions you have for me? I'd love to make this as productive as possible. I mean, my kids are trying to get this over with, I think, but I don't know.
Well, no, you got your hands full, and I just have to say you gotta. This is an awesome platform, awesome show, and you got some great questions here, and I really dig it. I really love it. But yeah, what's next for you? What advice do you have from what you've learned thus far? Do you have any advice as far as the best advice you've heard from, as far as what we can be doing as fathers that might be unconventional or something like that? I know that's a mouthful, but
boy,
I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a difficult one too, because there's so many different things. I think what I've really gathered is there is really no right way, right? Mm-hmm. And it is way harder to be a good dad than it is to be a bad dad. It's very easy to be a bad dad. Mm-hmm. But if we're doing everything we can to be a good business operator, then why are we not doing everything we can to be a good dad, right? I mean, those
right.
And the things that I've been saying for a while is my kids are like they're my own little businesses, right? My job is to be the CEO of this business and help these children to grow up, and hopefully eventually when they're 18, or hopefully maybe even sooner, I just become a board of advisors. When you need something, give me a call. That's how I'll know I've done a good job. I won't know until then if I've done a good job, that they can go run off and be the CEO of their own business. But there's no magic formula. There's no nothing. We all are struggling with the same type of stuff. We're all trying to work through the same things, but nobody really wants to admit it oftentimes. And it's, I have necessarily a golden nugget to say from the different, I mean, every podcast has had golden nuggets in it, don't get me wrong, but man, in general, just we're all doing what we can to be the best dads we can. And if anything, I've learned that you have to talk about it to become better at it, right? And not enough dads are actually trying to become better dads, and you're not going to become a better dad just by sitting there figuring it all out on your own. So have the conversations, be engaged with people. It's one of the reasons I love. I mean, we even have a micro tribe inside of GoBundance for dads, right? A Go Dads micro tribe where we get to talk about that type of stuff. And just being, I was on a real estate podcast when I got a tidbit about, hey, I think it was Devin Elders, and he was talking about how he has houses for his kids. And I was like, boy, that is a phenomenal idea. And that's when I started thinking to myself, how many other of these ideas of other dads can I steal? Like, I really want to steal all of these good ideas. And that's why I decided I was going to do this. So without that conversation, I wouldn't have all of this. So it's man, I don't know. I in turn gave you a mouthful of stuff back from your mouthful of questions. So I don't know if that actually answered it or not, though.
No, it really did. I mean, what I'm hearing there, it's just like, it's something that we're all doing our best, as long as we're on the track to just feeling like we're trying to be good dads, learning from others, learning what others are doing well. And we have so many examples of that in GoBundance, and that's the power of community, in my opinion. So no, I think it's a great answer, and I appreciate it, because I still need all the support and help I can get. It's
don't we all? So I was listening to one thing I always tell the boys is, and soon to be all the kids, whenever my 3-month-old is ready to actually hear me, is like, I don't need you to be perfect tomorrow, but I want you to be 1% better every day. If you're striving to be better every day, that's great. And I was listening to a podcast today. I think it was Jordan Peterson and Gad Saad. And he was talking to Sad was talking about, if you look at a thing in front of you and say, hey, I need to lose 80 pounds, like, it's very difficult to stay motivated to lose 80 pounds. But if you look at it and say, okay, well, every day that I wake up and I'm measuring myself, I just don't want it to go up. I want to see it go down. And eventually, if it goes down every day, if you're doing that thing, or at least on a weekly basis, a daily basis is a little bit tougher, but I don't remember if he said weekly or daily, but whatever it is, if I jump on the scale and I'm losing and I'm consistently looking at that loss every day, that 80 pounds goes away, but I didn't have this big 80-pound daunting goal in front of me. So if I'm looking at that as a dad, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I want my kids, as I tell the boys, I want them to be better men than me, my goal as a dad is to make them better men than me. Like, if I'm looking at that as the goal, that's a struggle, because I've got so much stuff I want to throw at them on a daily basis. But if I now break that down and say, okay, well, I want to pass on something to them today, as whether it's an example in something I do, or whether it's a story I tell them, or whether it's, whatever, I want a positive improvement in their life today. And every day I do that, because just to go back to the AA thing, right? I just need to not drink alcohol today. I just need to not screw them up today. And if I can focus on not screwing them up today, then I'll work on tomorrow when that one comes.
I love that. I mean, there's so much value in that. One step at a time, one day at a time, even with the kids, especially with the kids. Yeah. It's powerful.
Yeah. And I think, we don't have a choice, right? You can't live life any faster than one day at a time, but yet for some reason we always try to.
We do. And it's,
it's tough. But all right, well, I think that's a solid spot to call this one. So thank you so very much, Adam, for jumping on. If people wanted to listen to your podcast, if people want to reach out to you or anything, what is the best way for people to be able to get a hold of you?
Yeah, all my stuff is on my website, www.adamcliffordhill.com. Because there's apparently a lot of Adams out there, so I needed to use my middle name, and my Instagram handle, the Adam Hill, the Adam C Hill, and Adam C Hill on all of the other stuff. If you want to check out Flow Over Fear, it's on Apple Podcasts and YouTube at Adam C Hill, and that's, I think, all the stuff.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, I saw the C and I wanted to ask you about it because it looks like Adam Chill.
Right? Chill.
Right. But I was like, no, I bet you it's Adam C, and because I'm also Adam C, only I'm Charles instead of Clifford. But I was like, man, I've got to ask him about that. And then I completely forgot. So I'm glad you mentioned it. But,
yeah.
All right. Well, we'll have all of that in the show notes. But thank you so very much again, Adam, for jumping on. I really look forward to chatting some more in the future. And it was great to get to know you a little bit more. And I hope one of my listeners got something out of it. And if they did, then this was a success. So thank you again. If you can't, stick around for a second, and then we'll close it out.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam.
Right.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely.